It's kind of funny because I'm already seeing a lot of reviewers and a lot of reactors that I usually watch make their year-end lists already. And here I am just like, I have another review! Don't worry, I will be making my year-end lists, but first I just have a couple more albums I'm going to be reviewing this, and then there's one more next week, so let's just do them now to get them out of the way and get to the year-end lists. Camila Cabello is back with her second studio album, Romance. Camila Cabello is a name that I'm sure you guys recognize pretty well. Formerly 1/5 of the girl group Fifth Harmony, Camila was the first in the group to split off and do her own solo stuff, and in 2018 she had a massive year as she kicked off the year by releasing her debut album, Camila, which was a huge commercial success, and it spawned some massive singles like the track Havana, which reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and the top 10 peaking song Never Be the Same, and she has continued to see a ton of popularity since the release of those tracks and that album. I personally really loved Camila when it first came out. It was one of my favorite albums of last year, and it's one that I continue to go back to now. There were a lot of very emotional tracks that showed me a side of Camila that I wasn't really all that used to be honest. And on it, I felt like Camila had something kind of distinct and felt a little bit different than your typical pop act, and I was really liking what she was going for on that record. Maybe it's also the benefit of context, but I felt like that record, given that 2018 was a year where I went through a lot in terms of my anxiety, I felt like that was a record that really helped me through that, oddly enough. That said, I'm gonna be honest with you, I wasn't totally sure what to expect going into this album. For starters, it seemed like the hype for it was kind of muted in comparison to her debut album. I couldn't quite tell you what it was that caused that or why the hype was muted at all, but after an album that spawned 2 top 10 singles, I think the highest peaking song from this record was the leadoff single at like 52. And I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really pay attention to the pre-release singles for this thing before they came out. I didn't really listen to them or anything like that. And when I did hear small snippets, I wasn't totally grabbed in the same way that the debut record grabbed me. Outside of the track Señorita with Shawn Mendes, but I didn't really expect that to show up on the track list here. I thought if anything it would be like a bonus track that Camila would stick onto a deluxe edition of this record like Shawn did with his last album, but instead she actually put it smack dab in the middle of the record, so I don't know. But other than that song, the pre-release singles for this, when I did hear small snippets, weren't really anything that captivated me. A few of them I did end up enjoying, and we'll talk about those, but I wasn't really sure what to expect going into the album because I didn't really feel a whole lot of hype, to be honest, at least from those singles. So with that in mind, what did I get out of this new album? Well, I could tell you, given that I kept my expectations low, I didn't think it was that bad. However, I will say that if I have to compare it at all to her debut record, this one was pretty disappointing, I'm not gonna lie. And I don't really blame her for that because I think in terms of her vocals, she sounds great all throughout this record, but there's one big problem that's really holding her back: the production. Like, the album kicks off with the track Shameless, which is an emotional electro-pop influenced track that starts light before jumping into something heavy. I don't really like when it jumps into something heavy though, because I feel like the beat drop doesn't really fit with the emotional themes of the song. And while Camila's vocals are nice, I think the song just sounds too familiar, to the point where while listening to it I got a call back to something like The Great Divide from Rebecca Black's 2017 EP. So to me, it just didn't feel like it had that distinctiveness or anything that really jumped out at me like her debut record did. And then the track Living Proof leaned a little bit more into the Latin pop influence that Camila's had a lot of success with. Only thing is, the production again wasn't clicking on this song either. I thought that the somewhat off-time clicks throughout the beat didn't really do a whole lot for me, and it feels like the song is lifted a little bit by Camila's vocals. And even then, I think that some of the auto-tune takes away from how beautiful her vocals are, and while I don't mind hearing her jump into her higher register, I know some people aren't as crazy about it, I'm really not crazy about the staccato cadence she has going on the hook. Though I did enjoy the track Should Have Said It, which was a more bouncy, kind of poppy track that sounds a lot different from the earlier songs. In a few ways, I kind of heard it and thought it kicked back to the styles of Fifth Harmony a little bit, but with a little bit of a Latin flair in there. I actually like it. I think the energetic production on this one fit her, and her vocals sounded very great against the slick slick guitars and catchy beat. If anything, I kind of was curious as to why this wasn't one of the 5 pre-release singles. 6 if we count Señorita, but still. I had mentioned earlier that I thought a track like that would be like a bonus track for this album, but it turns out the bonus song that's exclusive to the digital edition is actually the 4th track on here, oddly enough, and it's the song My Oh My, which was described as a bit of a sequel to Havana. I mean, she's got the surprising rap feature down on this one. Last time it was Young Thug, this time it's DaBaby. As for the Havana sequel thing, I think that just kind of hits the nail on the head because the bouncy beat and groovy bass feel almost straight out of Havana. And while I do think Camila has some vocal charm on this one, and I do like DaBaby's fun flows, I just wish that as a sequel to Havana, this one took a few more risks or tried to expand on that one a bit, instead of just trying to catch lightning in a bottle twice. Then right after that, we get the track Señorita, which I don't really need to say much more about the song. It's been a massive hit. You've probably heard it a million times. Some people love it, some people don't. Me personally, for some reason, I just can't stop listening to it. The soundscape of it is so contagious. It's a relaxing song, but it sounds lovely. Sean and Camila, I think, have a great natural chemistry on the song, and I know it's probably one of those things where you guys might not like the song because it was played to hell, but for me, I can't stop listening to it, and I quite love it, even if I feel like its inclusion on this record was just to boost the streams back up. Moving from there, we get the lead-off single Liar, which was a bouncy, kind of reggae and flamenco influenced track. Camila's charm is on full display, and while I wasn't sure if I was going to like the beat drop, I actually liked the horns on it, and as a lead-off single that's gonna signal the new direction of the record, I actually really liked how it sounded a little like Havana and played into the style of that, but had enough to feel fresh and indicate that Camila was continuing to grow as an artist. I didn't quite see that growth though on the track Bad Kind of Butterflies, which was a more minimal, kind of dark trap-esque song that when I heard it made me wonder if Camila was just ripping from something like 7 Rings by Ariana Grande. Like, it's not quite as energetic, but the spacey vibe of it just feels like it was ripped straight out of 7 Rings. Camila again sounds good on the song, but I feel like she doesn't craft quite as catchy of a hook here, and again, the production doesn't give her much room to work with. Like, it almost feels like her producers weren't really confident in the direction of her last album, which did feel kind of fresh in my eyes, and they decided that with this record they should just jump on something safe and something that's been done before, and it's kind of disappointing to say that. And then we have the track Easy, which is a slightly heavier ballad that's built on a somewhat minimal yet pumping drum beat, and the production in general in this one is moody and ethereal. I like the sound of it, and again, Camila's vocals are lovely here, but it really doesn't do all that much different from many other pop songs you'll hear on the radio today. It lacks a real hook, and I guess the only way that I could describe it is lovely but empty. Like, it sounds nice, but it feels like it's just kind of in one ear and out the other. Though I did enjoy the track Feel It Twice, which was a lighter ballad centered almost entirely around some small guitar plucks, and the percussion on this one is pretty understated compared to some of the other tracks here. As light as it is though, I do like the direction of it. It sounds lovely, it builds appropriately at points, and it gives Camila some room to show off her lovely and emotional vocals. It's not the type of track to base an entire album around, of course, but for what's likely to be a deep cut, I think it's pretty nice. Though I couldn't say the same really about the track Dream of You, which is another light and more dreamy song that's built around some nice synths and a small drum beat. Like many of the other tracks on here, it's a song about love, and it's about Camila proclaiming her love for her significant other, aka Shawn Mendes. It's a somewhat slow burner of a song that unfortunately just doesn't feel all that distinct in regards to its production. Like, obviously there's some great vocals from Camila here, but it just enforces my big problem with the record, that the production doesn't feel distinct or give Camila enough room to showcase her vocals. There are a few tracks at the end of the record though that I do think are pretty good, like the song Cry For Me, which surprisingly moves into a little bit of a pop rock direction compared to some of her other stuff. It's different, that's for sure, but it's one of the few different directions here that I think really works. The beat's catchy, the guitars are really slick and really awesome, and there's something about this song that's just so contagious. I think it's just the immediateness of the chorus and Camila's vocal charm being so pertinent here, but this is one that I definitely think could be a replay button breaker. I also really like the track This Love, not to be confused with the Maroon 5 song. It's a somewhat acoustic ballad that feels like it has a slow jam-esque style to it. I was pleasantly surprised by that because when I heard the intro, I thought this was going to be a second or third coming of something like Real Friends or All These Years. But I think this new direction really fits Camila, and finally it feels like the production backs her up really nicely. The smooth instrumentals give her all the room to run around and showcase her great vocals, and I wouldn't be surprised surprised if a song like this ends up being played at a lot of weddings in the future. Although I wasn't quite as into the track Used to This, which interestingly enough was produced by none other than Phineas, the producer and brother of one of today's biggest pop artists, Billie Eilish. It kind of shows because the song has a somewhat dark feel and some of the filters feel a bit reminiscent of something you would hear out of Billie. I like that change of pace, and some of Camila's vocals are catchy as usual, but I think there are some points in the song where I can't help but feel like it just sounds like Camila trying to make a Billie Eilish song. Like, it's not bad, and maybe it could grow on me in the future, but as of now, I think that Phineas and Camila could have taken this one back to the drawing board a bit. But I think the album ends off strong with the track First Man. This one speaks less about romantic partners and more to Camila's father, Alejandro, seemingly trying to ease his mind about a relationship she's in. It's a light piano ballad, but the emotional feel of it is amazing. Camila's vocals feel right at home against the instrumentals here, and while I wasn't really floored by many of the lyrics throughout this thing, I think the writing on this song was really sharp, probably some of her better writing to date even, and it's far and away one of the highlights on the record. It's a great finisher. Overall though, I do have to say I'm pretty disappointed in this record. And I don't want to say that because I love Camila, but unfortunately this is just another 2019 album from an artist I love that's just a bit disappointing. Camila is still in top form as a vocalist, and even when she jumps up into her higher register, I think she sounds lovely, but as I've mentioned throughout this review, my big problem is that the production doesn't really support her all that well. Part of what made her debut album so compelling wasn't just her vocals or anything like that, but was the fact that I felt like the production was kind of fresh and kind of distinct. Here, it just feels a little bit more generic, and while there are some highlights, it feels like it just lacks the emotional punch and interesting instrumentals that graced her first album. I can say that this isn't a huge step backwards for Camila, and I can see her bouncing back, but I feel like while I noticed that she hyped a lot of the romantic themes on the album, I think whatever drops next, she's gonna have to probably hype a new sonic direction to keep it interesting. Like outside of Señorita, I noticed that the singles from this album haven't really had the chart success of something like Havana or Never Be the Same. And I wonder if that owes to the fact that sonically they didn't feel all that distinct or all that different. So with that in mind, I think that with her next record, whenever she decides to release it, it's gonna take a different sonic direction and a different overall sound for her to bounce back. Because a lot of this feels like it really could have just gone back to the drawing board. I'd say that I'm sure fans will love it, but given that I'm also a fan of hers, I'm not sure what other fans are gonna say. Maybe those that are more diehard fans of Camila will get a lot out of it, but for me, I'm just gonna hold out hope that her next record goes in a more interesting sonic direction. My favorite tracks on here were Should Have Said It, Señorita, Liar, Feel It Twice, Cry For Me, This Love, and First Man, and my least favorite tracks were Shameless, Living Proof, and Bad Kind of Butterflies. Overall, as much as I wanted to enjoy this record and give it a better rating than some people probably are gonna give it, I gotta say that Camila Cabello's new album, Romance, is gonna get an okay rating from me. It's definitely not bad, and there are a few tracks that I am going to come back to quite a bit, but it pales in comparison to her last record, and I just hope that whatever her upcoming music is, her producers give her better instrumentals to work with. But that's just my opinion on the record. What did you guys think about it? Did you love it? Hate it? Were you indifferent towards it? How do you think it stacks up to her debut album? And where do you think she could go next on a potential third album? What could be the compelling sonic direction that could bounce her back from this one? Leave your thoughts down in the comments section. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as much as we can. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thanks. If not, no biggie, I'm not a beggar. And as I said, next week is going to be my last review of 2019 before list season. I'm pretty sure you guys can infer from context clues what the album I'll be reviewing next week will be. By the way, I'm not going to be reviewing it, but I thought I'd mention it. I did listen to the new Liam Payne record, and it was just whatever to me. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it. It was just a whatever pop record. That kind of just hinted at what next week's review is going to be. I'm sure you guys already know what it is, so it doesn't matter. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.